This topic we'll cover in 3 parts. It's a larger topic: human population dynamics and resource consumption. This is part 1 of 3. Here we're looking first of all at the human population and how it's grown historically. So approximately 10,000 years ago, based on archaeological data, it's estimated to have only been 5 million people on the entire planet. It wasn't until about the year 1800 that we reached our first billion individuals. Then it took 123 years to get to 2 billion. Then it only took 33 years to get to 3 billion, 14 to 4, 13 years, 12 years, etc. Now here we are today in 2020, and we are just over 7.6 billion individuals. If population projections are correct and we continue to grow at the rate that experts are predicting, they're expecting approximately 9 billion human beings on the planet by the year 2050. And so what has driven this really dramatic and rapid increase in human population within the last 200 years or so? Well, that were the main drivers here were these 2 revolutions, industrial and scientific revolutions, that really helped to have better access to indoor plumbing, healthcare, better stuff to keep our food healthy and refrigerated and things like that. And that's really allowed us to both increase our survival rate, but also to increase our birth rates and things of that nature, with more access to food and everything. So with this growth of the human population, there's also a lot more demand for resources. Resources including animals that are used for many different reasons, some for food, some for hunted for sport, some as pets, and not just animals, but also plants, especially trees. We use wood for so many different things that we have to be careful we don't over harvest our forests and then run out of trees. Here's an example of overexploitation of resources. These are American buffalo skulls. When the European settlers moved west, they would just shoot buffalo out of the train and just leave them there. And we have these huge mountains of skulls. I mean, there's untold thousands of skulls here of buffalo that were driven almost to extinction because of hunting. Similarly, here in the Maryland, Virginia area, the Chesapeake Bay has been just decimated by human activities. These men up here are standing on a mountain of oyster shells. You can see them up here on the top. And that's just millions and millions of oyster shells that were harvested. So there's this huge population, and it's been decimated to like 2% or less of what it once was. And we're trying to regrow it, but it's going to take a long time, if ever, to get back to the massive amount of oysters that we had in the Chesapeake Bay in the past. Similarly, fish have been overharvested. You can see shark fins down here. Certain countries make like shark fin soup. It's a delicacy, and so the fins of shark are cut off, and the sharks are sometimes just thrown back in. Most of them don't survive. Here we have ivory, so tusks of elephants primarily there that we have ivory from, skins of different animals that are all harvested, and many populations are now in trouble because of this. We'll again do an activity in class looking mainly at overfishing to emphasize this point. This is Photoshop, if you couldn't tell. This is supposed to represent lungs, a pair of lungs here, and we've got, if we cut down all these trees, well, remember that plants, including trees and other producers, make oxygen. Now, it's unlikely to run out of oxygen, but they provide many important ecosystem services for us, and so we don't want to take them for granted. Cutting down trees, deforestation, is the main reason for losing biodiversity in the tropics. The tropics are these areas just a little bit north and south of the equator. And I saw this video one time where they were trying to identify new insect species, and every time they test a new tree, they'd find 1,000 new species they'd never found before. And they'd keep doing this over and over again and find 1,000 new species. And so who knows what we're losing? Again, it could be some miracle drug that could, cure some devastating disease, or it could be a new food source, or just, an important aspect for the other organisms that live there. You take a look here. This data is from 1990 to 2005, looking at what percent of these locations what percent of their forests they cut down within those 15 years. And you can see, here's the 50% mark, that a few countries here, Burundi and Comoros, I'm not actually sure where Comoros is, it could be an island nation, cut down about half of their forest in a 15-year period. Togo, close to that as well, and many others. So you might think, well, shame on all these countries for cutting down all their trees. How can they do this? Well, if you look here at the United States, this GIF is showing virgin forest. Virgin forest means that it was forest that was never harvested and cut down by mankind. And you can see that in 1620, almost all of our forests had never been cut down. But then again, the Europeans came over and, destroyed lots of things, and including our forests. And so today, we have almost no areas left that have not been cut down. So again, we can't just say, don't do this because we did it ourselves. We need to give these other countries a better option and help them to avoid making the same mistakes that we did by cutting down almost all of our old growth or virgin timber. And you know that this is a problem when you find dogs lining up to use the bathroom. There's not enough trees to pee on, I guess. So there you go. I always wonder, how did they get these dogs to line up in such a great line? They must be very, very well-behaved dogs. Another problem that comes along with deforestation is the breaking up of large areas of habitat. This is called habitat fragmentation. This is done by putting in, roads, logging, new housing developments, and even if you preserve the same total area, if it's all cut up into pieces, it's not as good for species. They can't, especially big species, they can't typically hunt as well, and there's more disruption, and they tend to disappear without having this. So it's important to have connections between fragmented habitats as much as possible, so they don't have to cross busy roads and risk, getting hit or something like that. Here you can see a dramatic example of deforestation and just this wasteland that was left behind. All of the topsoil, the very nutrient-rich soil, had blown away, and so this is not going to regrow much for many, many years. And so it's got to be careful about how logging is done in a sustainable way to keep our land healthy. And if you end up in a situation like that previous slide where you've got all this exposed soil and there's really no vegetation left to kind of hold the soil there, this process of desertification, basically the degradation of these ecosystems, can occur. And this can be driven by, again, unsustainable farming methods like slash and burn, where you cut things down, burn it, and then you grow something, and then the next year it just blows away and there's not much left. Certain types of mining, overgrazing. If you put cattle into a dryland ecosystem where they shouldn't be, like certain ecosystems in Africa where this is a big problem, they'll damage that soil to the point where you lose the topsoil and it can't recover, and it increases the spreading of this degraded wasteland, essentially, and clear cutting. All of these are exacerbated by climate change. As the climate gets warmer, we have extended droughts and less rainfall in areas that are already dry. You're going to have these problems occur, and the soil is going to get washed away, and this is bad for everyone. So that finishes this topic here. Sorry, it doesn't finish this topic. It finishes the first part of 3 of this topic. So we'll stop here and continue with the next video in just a little bit.